What is up, podheads? Back with another episode of the Podio Slate podcast. My name is Tony, joined as always by Anthony.
Anthony is in the building. That was third person. I've never done that, and I typically don't. I apologize.
George is getting angry. Yeah. But yeah, we're excited to come at you with another episode this week. A real fun one that we've had circled for a while to do, and it lived up to the hype and was a lot of fun. And yeah, Anthony, what do we do today?
We had Josh Grabelle, founder of Trustkill Records, which started in the 90s, went strong for 15 years, and it's been on a little bit of a hiatus until recently. And you'll hear all about it. We actually do get into some of the backstory. We get into some of Josh's legendary basement shows. So like between him and Jeff Brickley at Thursday, if you were a basement kid in the 90s, there was an outlet for you. But we get a little into that. But the big premise was 3 classic Trustkill records. And it was kind of tough to choose. Well, not kind of. It was tough. It was like choosing your kids.
Well, I mean, and that comes up right at the end of the convo where we're like, let's do it again. Like, there's plenty more to pick from here.
Yeah. So if you remember, and there's plenty to pick from, and I'd have trouble it might be harder to do the next 3, to choose those. But we did this same premise with Chris Wren of Bridge 9 a couple of years ago, where we picked 3, and in his case, 5 classic records that he put out. And we dig into it. We dig into how do you sign them? How'd you find out about it? You remember first hearing the record, some highlights, the rollout. And there's like nerdery weaved in and out of this, whether it's music industry stuff, whether it's, like we said, the release and the context of the time. But we get into Boys in the Well, Opposite of December, Terror, One with the Underdogs, Bleeding Through, This Is Love, This Is Murderous. And all those came out within a 5-year time frame, which is crazy.
Yeah, crazy. And real good insight, real fun insight on how all of those came to be and how, Josh was involved in their release and all that. And I mean, these types of episodes are so much fun to do because you get the backstory from a different, it's not necessarily a band member, but it's somebody who's intricately involved in the release of the record. You get the backstory and how it all comes to be. And I love doing these ones. These are so much fun.
These are a lot of fun. Yeah, you're right. It's not from a band member, but it's someone that was in the mix at the moment and certainly had a big part in these releases. We also hit on Hellfest. So if you're listening to this, like the day this episode comes out, Hellfest, Hellfira, that whole thing is this weekend in Rutherford, New Jersey at the Williams Center. Go look at the lineup. It's stacked. I assume there's tickets still available. There's still time. Who knows? We might just say on July 4th, like, we're going. Who knows, Tony?
We are off that day, so we can I could get in the car and drive down. Why not?
But the lineup is stacked. A lot of Trustkill bands and alum and all that stuff. But it's cool. Like, it's cool. It's back. It's cool. Trustkill's back. Sign and Bayway, Frozen Ground. Like, there's more to come to, and you'll hear all about it.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's get into it. Josh Grabelle, Trustkill Records. Let's go. You know him from Trustkill Records, founder. You know him from the legendary basement shows in Jersey. Well, I don't know him. I've heard about him. I wasn't there. Josh Grabelle's in the house. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So did the basement shows, do they live up to the hype all these years later? Because there's a lot of hype. Like, every now and then it'll come up in like message boards and stuff.
Yeah, I think so, man. It was the right time and the right vibe, I think, for, there were other basement shows around, right? There were other people doing basement shows in New Jersey, or they were like, garage shows in Southern California, right? But
yeah,
I don't know if it was just like my no fucks attitude, but from the very first show I had, it was like, everyone was like, oh, this basement is like old and decrepit, and
yeah,
Josh is moshing, so let's all mosh and sing along and go crazy. And it was just like, I just found it to be a lot different than like a lot of the other basement shows I was going to, where people were just kind of standing around with their arms crossed and then just, patting their chest. It was a lot of that in the 90s. But in my house, it was like Earth Crisis played and, kids lost their minds. I had, 200 of my friends packed into this little fucking room.
Love it.
Screaming their hearts out to Strife and Hatebreed and, you know, all these bands. It was cool. It was I mean, it was crazy. Like I think about, because I'm in the house right now talking to you from the house.
That's crazy.
That is, it's like a ghost that haunts you from the basement. It's like, yeah, that happened there. We can't talk about it, but that happened.
Yeah. So like, you know, I moved out, you know, in the 90s to go to school, and like I had those basement shows when I was in college. When I would come back in the late 90s, my parents, you know, they finished the basement, so it was no longer shitty, right? Like, you know, we had like torn down all the basement, like the ceiling tiles, right? Like we were rowdy and just fucking it all up. And my parents didn't care. They were like, yeah, the basement sucks. What are we going to do? It was flooding all the time, right? So it's nicer now. And now I live here. And now the basement where all these legendary bands played is like my kids' playroom. So there's like Legos all over the floor. And, you
That's
know,
amazing.
World moves fast. World comes fast at you.
Yeah.
So you did that, and I always like, I love to give Anthony shit because we were friends in around the time that he would have been going to some of the shows like that in our region, and never brought me. And now I see all these videos, and I'm like, man, I wish you had brought me along to some of those. They like, now I don't want to go. I die in one of those. But when I was 19, like, let's go.
Yeah. What's crazy is like now in 2025, right? You'll see like an Instagram post, and it's like house show DM for address, right? Which is smart, right? But in the early 90s, it was like, it was just for me and my friends. Like I would make flyers for like some of the later shows. But in the beginning, probably like the whole first summer I had shows, which was the summer of 93, I didn't really make many flyers. It was just like, I would just call my friends on the phone and be like, hey, Unbroken are playing with Mean Season in my basement. You should come. And like tell our other friends. And so, yeah, it was crazy. It was just like word of mouth. Like you had to know about it. And then like years later, you know, like people that have become good friends of mine from New Jersey will be like, oh, dude, like I grew up 10 minutes from you and like had no idea that was going on.
That's amazing.
Or like there's literally like a dude on my street. There's a guy on my street who's like a little bit younger than me, but like he knows about hardcore, and like he eventually, you know, discovered Earth Crisis and Hatebreed and all these bands, and then discovered that years before he got into it, they were playing like 3 houses down from him, and it like blew his mind.
Yeah. Wow.
That's amazing. I thought I'd ask because I mean, Tony's heard this a million times. Like anything that I just missed out on, like there's always FOMO. Like I get hung up on certain eras, and that is certainly one of them. And we're from Maine, so like it wasn't like Earth Crisis was playing my neighbor's house. So I just geek out about it. But yeah, so I wanted to ask you about it. But so I think that the Trustkill story has been well chronicled. So we wanted to approach this a little different with you. Hit on 3 classic records. Before that, just with a lot of activity with the Trustkill camp, I want to see what's popping off now. You know, like how back is Trustkill in 2025? Because there was what, a 10-15 year kind of lull, right?
You know, Trustkill went away in 2010. I started, you know, some Trustkill social accounts in like the mid 2010s, right? Like I started an Instagram and you know, just to kind of like document the legacy or whatever. Like just, you know, like I had, you know, a whole house full of, you know, like my house is a Trustkill museum basically, right? Like I have everything. So I just started like posting things, and then sometime around 2018 I had this idea to go back to Universal Music, get Trustkill back, and that took a couple of years. I thought maybe I had that done by 2020. That got done in 2022. And yeah, I mean, I've been, you know, just taking it, I don't want to say taking it slow, but like just being realistic with like where I am and where Trustkill is and where music is in 2025 or 24, you know, whatever, in 2022, right? Like I was like, all right, like I got to get started, like, you know, all the things I had talked about doing for years, and like, you know, the stuff I pitched Universal, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this, and we should do that. I can't believe we never did this. And like, you know, all this stuff is missing from here. And, you know, so like all of that shit took me like a year. And then as like that whole process went on, it was like, you know, bands like Bleeding Through and It Dies Today and Walls of Jericho, and, you know, bands were coming to me with ideas and, oh, well, we should, this record's out of press. We should do this. I'm like, all right. So, I was doing all that. And then it was like, all right, well, I can sign new bands too. So like, let's sign a new band. But I was waiting for the right moment. And I signed Bayway a few months ago. And I have the new Bayway album dropping July 4th, New Jersey hardcore band. And I think that's really going to like set the tone going forward.
They're a perfect New Jersey band too.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. I was explaining it to my buddy Carl from Ferret Records, singer for Nora, yesterday. We were in the car driving to Brooklyn. And I was like, man, Bayway is a band like as if I was like some evil genius scientist in my like hardcore lab. And I like created like my ultimate hardcore band. It's Bayway, right? Like they're all legitimate hardcore kids. They love the scene. They give more to hardcore than they take. They're great people. The music is incredible. The lyrics are incredible. Their work ethic. They rep New Jersey harder than anybody. So this is really exciting. The album is incredible. They played New Jersey on Saturday. It was sold out. We had a Bayway dinner before the show.
Bayway team dinner. I love it.
Yeah, it was like an eat and greet, right? So like
Nice.
There was an eat and greet where Jay Bayway like cooked the whole authentic Italian meal, and you got to listen to the new album before it came out, and you got an exclusive T-shirt. And it was so cool, and we filmed the whole thing like an upcoming Trustkill DVD. So it's going to be cool. And then I got just signed Frozen Ground from Buffalo, who is 3/5 of It Dies Today, playing more straightforward hardcore. And that's really exciting. We dropped one song. We got a new song coming out next week, and then a record at some point. They're playing Hellfest. They're playing with Missing Link in Brooklyn. We got Michael from Pain of Truth on a track. We got Mike from Missing Link on a track. It's awesome. And then, from there, I'm just... I got so much. I'm working on so much cool shit for this year, next year, and just beyond.
That's exciting, man. Well, I'm sure you had the itch the whole time, right? You never wanted to stop doing it, but now you can do it again.
Yeah, and it was like, it's crazy because like, Trustkill was my baby, right? Like every album I put out was like one of my children, and it was like, but I was so close to it that it was hard for me to like, see the forest, like. Right? Like that saying goes. But like years later, it's easier to like look back on like what I did. And sometimes I'm like, oh shit, like I did that. Like that's crazy, right? Like just a few weeks ago, I'm standing on a rooftop in New York City in the financial district with 3,500 people watching Bullet for My Valentine play the Poison album that I put out 20 years ago.
Crazy. It's a lot of people. It's
and,
a shit lot of people.
It's like I signed the band. They're from Wales. No one ever heard of them. And here we are 20 years later. I just dropped a reissue, remastered version of the album. And they just did a worldwide tour on that record. And it's just, it's just so cool to like be a part of that. And, and it was, it's weird. It's almost like that record is by far the biggest album I ever put out and I've ever been a part of. And it was only released on vinyl one time in the UK only, and they only pressed like 500 copies. And we never pressed it in the US, and then it was never pressed this whole time for the last 20 years. So it was almost as if like they were waiting for me to come back or something.
Yeah. There's an appetite there for sure too. Like if there's only 500 of them and they were only across the pond, man. Like,
oh yeah.
Well, I'm putting myself in your shoes. 15 years. It's probably different than being in the thick of it in like the mid 2000s. Cause I'm sure you're like, all right, we just put this out and then we need to follow up with this and on the heels of this and all that. But now you can kind of start fresh, but still having the back catalog.
Yeah, I can start fresh. I have the catalog. Also, so you got to imagine, right? Like I put out my first record in 1994. I was doing everything for my label up until 2002. Right? Like I had friends helping out here and there, but I didn't like hire anyone to do anything until 2002. And even then it was just like, I hired my buddies to do mail order, right? Like, because I designed my own web store and I was fulfilling all my own mail order in my basement by myself up until that point. So I hired some friends to help out with that. And then, I really started to like add some staff and like hire some people and put people on salary. But that really wasn't until like 2004, 2005. And then everything collapsed in 2009, essentially. So if you look back at like the history of Trustkill, it went from 94, so 15 years. I only had people working for me for 5 or 6 of those years.
It's crazy. That really is crazy.
And like when I think back at those 5 or 6 years, like those were the most stressful time of my life. Like having a staff, having to worry about payroll and health insurance and 401ks and just like all this crazy stuff. I'm like, man, I'm just a hardcore kid in my basement, like putting out terror records. Like, what the fuck am I doing?
What changed? What happened here? Yeah.
Like this is crazy, like, but I was selling a lot of records and there were a lot of expectations and, it got crazy. So like, when I had this idea to bring Trustkill back in like 2017, 18, something, I was like, man, I could just do this myself again. Like, why the fuck not? Like, that's when I had my biggest successes, right? Like, I was doing this on my own, right? Like, I was my own A&R guy. I designed everything. I built everything. So, yeah, it was exciting just to get to start again and like really dig into it. I don't answer to anybody, which is cool. So
that's yes. All the stuff falls on you, but at the same time, you get to do it your way. And you don't have to worry about anybody else telling you, hey, try it this way.
Things fall on me because I control everything. So I'm okay with that. So it's very cool. Yeah.
So one of those records, we're going to start with Poison the Well, Opposite of December, Season of Separation, December 99. So you're a one-man show. And we did a full episode of that album on this podcast, had a lot of fun with it.
Nice.
I just missed it in the moment. So I kind of went back once Tear from the Red came out and all that. So you were there almost from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So they had that EP in 98, Distance Makes the Heart Grow Fonder. How did you find out about them? Like, how did they get on your radar?
That's a great question. So in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, like I was everywhere I could be where there was hardcore, right? So I was very aware of South Florida hardcore at that point. I mean, I was already a big Shai Hulud fan, right? Like I saw Shai Hulud at Middlesex County College when Chad Gilbert was 15 years old. That's when I met him. So that was years before, I started thinking about Poison the Well. And I was going down to South Florida too for like, Gainesville fests and whatever other fests there were and just hanging out with South Florida hardcore kids, right? Met John Wiley from Eulogy, met, whoever else. So like, then I'm up in Syracuse for, I was in law school. So I was up in Syracuse for law school in the late 90s. And I had this like little series of split LPs I did 3 split LPs, and one of them was with Shai Hulud. The Shai Hulud, Another Victim split, right? So South Florida meets Syracuse hardcore split. It all made perfect sense at the time. And Shai Hulud, Chad quit Shai Hulud right in the middle of them recording those songs to focus on Newfound Glory. And so the band like went back home from the studio to like recoup, like, figure themselves out. What are we going to do? We got to get a new singer. Matt Fox is like, calling me, being like, dude, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter when this record comes out. Like, just, find the best singer you can and, make this work. Because they recorded all the songs, they just need a new singer. So in the middle of us talking about them trying to find a new singer, which they ultimately did, they found, Geert from Holland. He calls me one day. I'm in my dorm room at Syracuse in law school, And he calls me, and like looking back on it, I talk about it. It felt kind of like that scene in Back to the Future where, Marvin calls his brother and he's like, I got that sound you're looking for, right? Like, so Matt Fox calls me from the studio and he's like, yo, I'm in the studio with Jeremy Staska and he's recording Poison the Well, their new record, and it's insane. You have to hear it. And I'm like, okay, let me hear it. Like, I was aware of the band, but I was like, he was hyping this up. Like, I was like, all right, cool. Like, I got to hear it. And, so eventually I got on the phone with, it was probably like, I think I was dealing directly with Alan Landsman at the time, who was their bass player. But I think Alan was the one who just called me up and was like, hey, like, I heard you want to hear this record. And I'm like, hell yeah, I do. So they, I don't know how he did things back in 1999, but like, he probably mailed me a CD or something. And yeah, and then they came up for a weekend of shows from South Florida. They came up and did like Syracuse, and they played Erie, and they played like maybe one other show some weekend in like, the middle of 99. And that's when we, I gave them the contract and they signed the contract and they finished the album. And then we, got Jake Bannon to do some art. And then I put it all together and had an album out.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I think the album, like the production, the recording costs like, I want to say like $1,500 was like the total production for.
Even with Jeremy in there in the mix?
Even with Jeremy, yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. I think that's probably all it was. Like, yeah.
Wow. Well, so you get to hear it, right? Somebody's turned you on to them. You get to hear the music. At this point, do you know what you're signing? Because like it's kind of the early stages of this style of music, where the hardcore and the metalcore and the all of that kind of coming together. This is a blueprint record for that. There's only a couple of bands at this time that are even attempting to do music this way.
I'll tell you how I explained it. I explained the band.
Yeah. Oh, let's hear this.
Well, I just remember that I had this memory of the Earth Crisis dudes sitting in my living room in my dorm in Syracuse, and I remember playing the record for them, and I was like, so it's like hardcore, but like he also sings sometimes, and they were like, really? Like they were like, huh? And I'm like, yeah, kind of like VOD, and they were like, oh, like so like VOD was that band who I think like at the time, like that's who I thought like compare them to. It's like they're a hardcore band, you know what you're getting, right? I was like, it's heavy, it's screamy, right? But then like sometimes he's gonna sing, and like he can also sing, and like holy shit, he can sing too,
Yeah, and there wasn't a lot of that, right? Like especially this time. So to sign it's a risk, but if it sounds good, like you got to know that people are gonna kind of go to it, and they did. Obviously, I mean, we're still talking about that record 25, 26 years later now. So
yeah.
So when you're hearing it, because when we did the episode, leading up to that episode, I listened to it. We probably listened to it like 10 times, and I never like dissected it to that level. And there's so many weird nuances, and how Jeff like repeats the spoken word stuff, and it's just the thing is we have all the backdrop of the last 25 years, right, of everything that came. But for you in the moment when that hit you, were you like, what is this, or was it like, did you know what you had?
I did. I had a really emotional hardcore album. Like that's what I thought it was. I was like, I came from a world of the 90s, right, where I was, going to an Earth Crisis show one day, but then going to see Jawbreaker the next day and Sam I Am the next night. And, so like, to me, I'm like, this is just a very emotional hardcore record. Like he's singing about shit that really means something to him. And that's how I thought about it.
So the album comes out. How was it received in the moment? Because obviously, again, we with the hindsight of the 25 years we've had plus, it's lauded. It's a classic. It's an in-genre classic. It's a heavy music classic. But in 1999, 2000, what were people doing to you? Were they hitting you up? Was it like the phone couldn't stop ringing, or?
It wasn't that fast. It wasn't like I put it out, right? Like I think the reason that the release date says December 99 is because like I received them from the pressing plant, right? Like I didn't know anything about street dates or anything, right? Like I just sold records when I got them out of on a merch table at a show, right? So I got them in like December of '99. I think I sold them at like a Syracuse show, like I forget, just like a random Syracuse hardcore show, and that's like when they came out. That was the street date, and then I probably got them to my distributor. I was using Lumberjack at that point from Ohio, and I got them to Lumberjack, like a month or two later or whatever. And so it was a slow build. But I remember that time in early the year 2000 is like really when like Napster started like becoming really meaningful. And I remember at Hellfest 2000, which was, only 7 months later, and I'm standing there on stage with Steve Reddy from Equal Vision, and Poison the Well are playing, and the crowd is going insane, right? Like the biggest sing-alongs of the entire weekend. And Steve just elbows me and he goes, "Dude, how many of these records did you sell?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know. Like, it's done okay, but like, it doesn't seem like this many, right?" And like, I attributed that to Napster, right? Like those few songs that were on Napster, right? Like Nerdy just hit Napster at the right time, and like everyone knew Nerdy, and then like A Wish for Wings That Work. Like it was just like those couple tracks were on, and it was just like exploding. And then the band was like playing other cities, and they were like telling me like, "Dude, it's crazy. Like we haven't really sold any records in this city, but people know these songs and they know the lyrics." And I was like, wow, that's when I really started like figuring out like the power of, MP3s and digital distribution and just all that stuff. It was a wild time. And then I think, after that, things started picking up. And then of course, fast forward to 2002 was when I signed my deal with Sony. And then, records really started selling at that point.
This is fascinating to me because, like I said, we have this lens of today and all the history that you read about. But back then, like obviously, you didn't know it because you lived it in the moment. But
I was just a dude in a little apartment in Syracuse, right? Barefoot in my shorts, shoving mailers full of CDs.
Did you go to class? Like what?
I did. I always tell people, I'm like, man, I just, it was a very busy time of my life, right? Like I was in law school from 98 to 2001, right? So in those 3 years, I signed Poison the Well, 18 Visions, Walls of Jericho, ran Hellfest, and went to law school. And I just didn't sleep. I'm like, I'm young. I don't need sleep. I'll sleep when I'm older,
Absolutely.
So I just did what I had to do, right? Like I just was at school all day, came home, did my homework, and, studied and made it through.
I'm curious, in 99, 2000, was there such a thing as like a Trustkill kid? You know what I mean? Like, because like when you look back, Despair the Pattern LP was out, Pattern Life LP, the Harvest record was out, and we allowed those as classics. But where I'm going is, how were like Trustkill, if you came from that world, what did they think of Poison the Well?
Yeah, I think Poison the Well got looked at as kind of like, like a newer kind of
the new wave, right?
More, yeah, new wave, newer emo kind of band. Like I said, like I call them an emotional hardcore band, but then the emo tag came around, and I even heard like post-hardcore, and I'm like, well, I don't really hear post-hardcore, but I think like they got that tag just because he was singing, right? So, but it wasn't really post-hardcore; it was legitimately a hardcore record that he sang on. So
it's crazy, yeah, and it's still. I mean, we're in what 2025 now with a reunion show, or not the reunion shows, was the 25-year tour. That was this year, right?
Yeah, that happened in the spring, late last year into this year, right?
And that popped off. I mean, the Boston show was at Roadrunner. That holds 3,500 people.
Yeah.
Insane.
I know. That was one of the things I was saying before. I'm not sure if I finished my thought, but like, getting Trustkill back and being in 2025, we really we have this lens to like look back, but it's also like, I don't necessarily choose how Trustkill is looked at now based on what I did back then, as well as like all these bands, right? And like some bands, some records just get bigger over time, right? Like no one could have ever predicted that Refused was going to be getting $500,000 to play Coachella, right? Like like when Refused broke up, whatever year that was, 2000, 99, I don't remember what year it was, they were playing to 150 people a night in the States. People barely knew who they were. And they came back a decade later. So it's like, that's just an example of a record and a band that got bigger over time. But I could, it's like, you're right. Like Poison the Well did not play for 3,500 people in the 2000s. They were a big deal and we loved them and they were great, but they were never that big. And you can say the same for maybe some of these other bands. I mean, Walls of Jericho were playing for 75,000 people in Europe all summer. It's crazy.
Nuts. Yeah.
So, yeah, I just reissued the Shattered Realm record from 2003 that came out on Eulogy, right? Was that on Eulogy? Yeah, or Alvaran, but then it got the strip picked up by Eulogy.
I think it was Eulogy at one point. Yep.
Yeah. But like, and like Days just did the On Broken Wings reissue from Eulogy. And it's like, who would have thought that all these Eulogy records from these bands that were like, they weren't headlining Hellfest or Furnace Fest, right? But they were playing, but they were like, smaller bands, right? Playing to 100 kids. And now 20 years later, like the Shattered Realm record is looked at as like this legendary record that like practically started, this style of music that is so prevalent today in 2025. Like if you go to any hardcore show in 2025, some band sounds like Shattered Realm or is covering Shattered Realm, or, I just saw On Broken Wings on Saturday with Shattered Realm. And, just like time will tell us, right, which records from today we're going to be talking about. It's like, we don't know. Are we going to be talking about the new Gridiron or the new Straight from the Path or the new, which band?
Are you lurking in our group text, Josh? Because Anthony and I had this same text the other day. We were just kind of going back and forth about bands and how sometimes they just need time and they don't in the moment. Yeah. They don't necessarily have time, but like 10 years down the road, it's like, I don't fault anybody for getting back together and going to make some money off of people digging their stuff from 15 years ago. Like, why not?
Yeah, exactly. Why not? The other thing is like, man, in the 2000s, not to bring everything back to 2000s, but that was an incredible time for music. Bands in the 2000s, they all felt like it was all or nothing, right? Like
100%.
Every band on Trustkill felt that way, not because of me, but just due to the music scene and how everything worked. But like, it's like 18 Visions were like, they were giving it their all, right? And they were like, if we're not giving it our all, like if we're not doing this at 110%, then let's just break up. And it's like, at the time, like I kind of understood, like I was disappointed, like I was bummed when they made that decision. But like, in 2025, it's like, why wouldn't you just record some new songs? Or why wouldn't you just play a show sometimes? Like this shit is so much easier now, right? Like you don't, it's like, yeah, of course, there's less money to be made in music than there was in the 2000s, but like it's a much easier, the barrier to entry is like way less, right? Like you can just be a band and like play sometimes.
Yeah, you don't have to be all or nothing anymore.
Exactly. Like you don't, like sometime in like the 2010s, like I was talking to the Earth Crisis guys and they're like, yeah, we're just gonna like do what we do. Like we're never gonna do a 30-day tour of the US. That's never gonna happen. But it's like modern conveniences have allowed us to be able to like just fly somewhere for a weekend and like, go to this country for a weekend and like, Bayway and Shattered Realm just did London. They just did 2 shows and came home. Like, why not? So yeah, that's cool.
Well, we had a conversation about this, a previous episode where it was like, if that model existed in the 2000s, think about how many more records we would have gotten out of these bands. Because they, it's the what if game, which is fun to play, but hey, it worked out the way it worked out. But yeah, Poison the Well, Opposite December, I think it deserves every ounce of praise it still gets. It hit back then, it hits today.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to keep it moving to another record, which I mean, I've listened to 100 times plus over the years. I listened to it a number of times leading up to this convo to relive it, and it still hits. It's Terror One with the Underdogs, July 2004. You had worked with Vogel in the Despair days. So there was that relationship, I'm sure. They had just come off Lowest of the Low, which Chris at B9 put out. The stories, Vogel moved to the West Coast, starts Terror, all that. How do you come into the picture post Lowest?
So, of course, I knew Scott since 1995, 94, 95. I was a fan of Slugfest, and then he started Despair, and I was a huge fan. Despair played in my basement the summer of 95. Actually, Despair played the very last show in my basement. It was the end of the summer, 95. It was Despair. It was an Ignite show that I put Despair on. They came down from Buffalo. I put Endeavor on, who were from New Jersey. And then I had Hatebreed come down from Connecticut to play. And that's where Scott Vogel met Jamie Hatebreed, was in my basement, and got the Hatebreed demo. But anyway, so I had a long history with Scott. I then signed Despair. I put out the Pattern Life record. I put out the 1000 Cries record. I went on tour with Despair in the US when they did the Trustkill Takeover tour with Harvest and Brothers Keeper. I then went on tour with Despair in Europe for a full European tour in 97. Then Despair breaks up. He starts Buried Alive. I actually designed the Buried Alive album. So me and Mike Ski from Brothers Keeper, we partnered up on that record the same way we did the Earth Crisis Breed the Killers, where he did the artwork and then I did the design. So that was Buried Alive. Of course, I had them on. Yep, there it is. Is that the reissue or the OG?
I'm not sure. 1999.
Oh, it's on Victory.
On Victory. Yeah, it's on Victory.
I designed that.
You did that. This is you.
Yeah.
Damn.
All
right. So you have your hands on more records than the Trustkill records I have here.
Yeah. Oh, I designed a lot of records. I did that, Breed the Killers. Like the first 30 albums on Ferret Records were all my designs, all the Disembodied and all that shit. But yeah, so Buried Alive came and went, right? And then he moves to LA, starts Terror. Of course, I'm a huge fan. They play Hellfest. And I remember being at Furnace Fest in 2003, it must have been, maybe 2002? No, 3. And I remember standing there with like Scott and Todd Jones, and we're talking about Terror. And I'm like, dude, I love Terror. I would love to do this. Like, what's it going to take? And I remember Scott's response was funny, because he didn't want to like let me down. He didn't want to disappoint me.
Like a parent.
He knew at the time like how hard Trustkill bands were like working and touring, right? Like this is 2003, like, 18 Visions, Poison the Well, Walls of Jericho, all these bands are, touring worldwide. And he was like, dude, he goes, this is like my 5th band. How old were we in 2000? He's like, I'm 30, or, like whatever it was, can't do the math. He's like, I don't know how many more records I have in me, dude. Like, this could be the last one. He's like,
wow.
That's funny. Will that be okay with you? And I'm like, dude, of course. Like that, like I can't predict the future. Like, it's like, I of course want to sign you for more than one record, but like if you only have one record in you, like then that's it. What am I going to do? And it's just funny, like to think back on that conversation, right? Because like then I put out One with the Underdogs, July 2004. And then I reissued Lowest of the Low. Then I put out Always the Hard Way. And then I put out the Living Proof DVD.
Great DVD. One of my favorites, actually. Music DVDs. Right?
Yeah, that was my idea. I'm like, dude, we got to do a fucking DVD. Like, what are we doing? Like, you guys have the best live show there is. Mm-hmm. Let's just film the best show we can film and put it on a DVD. And he was like, all right, cool. So, and then after that, I did that Forever Crossing the Line CD, which was like another like kind of compilation of other various Terror releases. So it's like, I did 5 or 6 Terror releases. Oh, then I did a Live at CBGB album, right? So many Terror records. And then Trustkill goes away. Then they go to Century Media, Victory, Pure Noise. It's like they're working on their 10th album now, and like Scott still killing it.
And they tour like crazy too.
I don't know how they do that.
Still killing it. their set lists every night, killing it, right? Like, so it's awesome. And I just reissued that Live at CBGB record, which was really cool to finally get to do. Remastered it, redesigned the whole thing. Scott hated the way it looked when it originally came out because it was a licensed deal, right? Like we recorded it, but then we licensed it to whoever was doing the CBGB live series. But yeah, so man, One with the Underdogs, holy shit. When I heard it, I fucking knew.
Yeah.
I knew.
I mean, how could you not? It's banger after banger.
I'm like, this record, this band. What's crazy is like I vividly remember it coming out on the Friday, the first day of Hellfest 2004, and I have this like feeling of this new Bayway album that's dropping on Friday, July 4th of Hellfest. It feels very similar, like the hype, the fact that like I know that this album is going to crush. No one's heard it yet, but like, you know, it's like I knew I was there with Terror on One of the Underdogs in 2004, knowing like, man, this record is, you know, it's going to kill and be like, we're going to be talking about this record for 20 years.
21 now, right? We're talking about it today, so.
Yeah. I got to do so much cool shit with that record. I mean, like, I don't know if you have the first press CD, but the first press of One with the Underdogs CD
is a vinyl.
Is a vinyl
yes,
CD.
I have it. I do have it.
You have it, which confused the living shit out of people.
And the bottom's black.
It's black. It has grooves like a record. I think I even made it look like a test press. I did that by hand. I wrote Terror One of the Underdogs by hand to make it look like it was a test pressing. But dude, I got like emails from people complaining like they would buy it at Best Buy. And they'd be like, what is this?
This isn't what I ordered.
I thought it was a CD and it was a fucking record. And the people returning them, people at Sony, right? Like my distributor, they were confused. But it's so fucking cool. And like, no one has done that since. Like, I cannot believe.
I never saw it before. Never saw it after.
It, but like, I'd never seen one before that. I was basically like sitting in a meeting at Sony one day, and it was like in a pile of shit on someone's desk. And I'm like, I picked it up, and I was like, I asked like my head of sales guy, Howie. I'm like, yo, what the fuck is this? This is crazy. I'm like, this is the CD? And he was like, yeah. He's like, we can do that. I'm like, wait, who? Like Sony can do this? And he's like, yeah, we have like a proprietary way to do that. And I'm like, I want to do that. I go, I have the perfect record. So yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah.
I miss getting to do lots of cool, fun shit like that. Like that cost a fortune, but like I didn't give a shit because, you know, I knew I had a great record and I didn't care. I just wanted to make cool stuff, you know, like I came from the world of, you know, Gravity Records and Ebullition and Hydra Head and just like all these record labels that just like made shit cool, right? Like, you know, like that Terror record and that Open Hand record where I die cut the tray card. Still never seen anyone do that.
Oh wow. I
And
about that.
yeah, just like stupid shit. Like I didn't care. I just spent money. I'm like, oh, I can spend Sony's money on my bands. Great, I'm doing it.
Well, and all it does is get you a rep for, hey, the packaging's going to be cool, the art's going to be cool, the music art, we already know the music's good. Like it just elevates, you know,
I'm like,
your
how
brand.
much money can I spend on a CD, right? Like I was, right, if you notice, like the 2000s, right? Like you'd buy a New Hopes Fall CD and it came with the CD sampler in the CD, right? Then I was putting the Trustkill trading cards in the CD. Then I was putting a 16-month Trustkill calendar in the CD. And then I was figuring out how to vacuum pack a T-shirt to the CD. Like,
yes,
I didn't give a shit.
Well, what I love looking back is you did all that, like that alone, like wasn't going to sell. It wasn't to sell records. You know what I mean? Because you had that piece of it. The presentation was on point, but look at the artwork that was chosen for the album. Like if you wanted to move units, they wouldn't have chose that artwork.
Yeah.
It's wild. I think it was what probably everyone wanted to do, just at scale that hadn't been seen before.
Exactly. Like, so I came from a world, I was sitting in my dorm room in 1993, 94, putting those little the rope. We were tying rope through those threadbare 7 inches that came out on Watermark because Joel Jordan from Watermark was my roommate in college, and we took 1,000 7 inches and we cut little rope and we hole punched the 7 inch covers. Then we tied the rope and like I did 1,000 of those. So like
Wow.
just that's where like I came from. Like I just wanted to like continue. Like how do I do cool shit like that? But you know, like you said, like scale it up. You know.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I think most people. I mean, Terror's career has been truly one of a kind, and just the fact they've been so consistent is crazy. But I think when it boils down to it, when people look back at, all right, what are the best Trustkill, the best Terror albums? I mean, certainly Lowest of the Lows in there. One with the Underdogs is in there. A lot of people say this latest one, Pain into Power, is the latest, but One with the Underdogs is, I think it is my favorite Terror record.
Yeah, I'm have to agree with you. You know, you can't go see Terror play, right, where they're not playing 4 or 5 of those songs from One with the Underdogs. And man, like, you know, I can watch Terror play Spit My Rage every single night and never get bored.
Do you remember first hearing that?
It's just one that, oh, dude.
With Diablo and Josta. Do you remember like first hearing that, be like, holy shit?
Of course. Man, like, there was talk of them, like, not using, like, him spitting at the end, right? And I'm like,
you gotta have that in there.
And I'm like, nah, dude, like, that's so fucking cool. Like, that shit is staying in. And, yeah, like, just, of course, like, having Jamie and, you know, Ezek on those tracks was amazing. And then, like, you know, even, like, Always the Hard Way. Like, we had, you know, Eddie from Leeway on a track. And, like, to me, like, Leeway is, like, top 5 album of all time. So to have him on a track, like, a couple years later was insane. But, yeah, man, One with the Underdogs is just so cool. Do people know that that's the guy from Demon Hunter on the cover?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No,
So,
actually, I was going to ask you, who's the guy? Who's the guy, and why was the album cover changed several times over the years?
Well, I'll tell you exactly why. So at that time in the mid 2000s, like, one of the best guys designing records was Don Clark from Asterisk Studio in, you know, he's from Washington State. So he designed like Poison the Well, Tear from the Red. He designed Open Hand. He designed Terror, One with the Underdogs. He designed a whole bunch of Ferret releases, right? Like Every Time I Die. And so he was like the dude. He did the Bleeding Through, This Is Love, This Is Murderous. So I think he came up with the whole idea, right? Like the dude crouched in the corner, beaten, right, with the ropes or whatever, and the blood. And
yeah.
And he used his brother as the model, and him and his brother are in Demon Hunter.
Right on. Wow.
Yeah. So like, yeah, no one knew that. And I think it was one of those things, right, where it was like, you know, I showed Scott the art and he was just like, yeah, it's cool. Right. And like the whole band was like, yeah, it's cool. Right. Like one of those things. But like as the years went on, Scott realized that he just didn't like the art. And he just wanted to change it, which, you know, that's fine. Same thing with like the Live at CBGB record. And, you know, I think, yeah, he just thought it didn't represent the band, or he didn't like the idea. I don't know what it was, but yeah.
Well, I mean, the good thing is like at the end of the day, there's no rules with this stuff. You can do whatever the fuck you want, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you know, 18 Visions reissued Until the Ink Runs Out, completely changed the art, but then are reissuing it again and are bringing back the original art. Right. So yeah. I'm like, I told Keith, I'm like, yeah, I'm excited to have the OG art back, you know? But yeah, I mean, there are no rules. It's just like, you know, whatever the band wants. If it looks like it belongs to the band, right? Like I've seen some reissues that just don't make any sense, right? Like I just recently saw like that Turmoil, the Process of reissue that someone did at some point, and it looked like an Obey propaganda record, like some ad or something. I'm like, what is this? Like, it looked like a Rise Against record. I'm like, this does not fit. Like, this is not what the Turmoil record is supposed to look like in my mind. You know, like, of course, I'm a little bit biased because I designed the Process of also.
Well, it's funny. I got beef with that CD too. You can't tell which side's which.
The CD?
Process of the CD,
really?
yeah.
I designed the vinyl. I didn't. I'm not sure if I designed a CD. I may have, but
It's the process of is etched in the very center where you
oh,
put it in.
like
Otherwise,
nothing else?
nothing else.
Oh, that's funny.
So I always have
That's
to
better than me. I don't know. I have to look it up on Discogs.
Oh man, you're unlocking some memories. Like I hadn't thought of the vinyl, and for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, it's not like a photo of a vinyl. It's like etched like a vinyl. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
It has
Yeah.
grooves and yeah. And then I don't know if you remember you do. You have the Living Proof DVD, right? So of course I'm thinking I'm gonna put out a DVD. It's gonna cost a fortune. How can I spend more money on it? And we did those like big
Oh, the stencils.
stencil,
The
right?
stencils, yes.
And I convinced Scott, I'm like, yo, let's put a fucking stencil in the DVD and just get people tagging terror all over their cities and like getting arrested and and he's like that might be a bad idea. I'm like, it might be, but
It's on them at that point though, not you.
I think I still have my stencil and I might use it.
It doesn't say Trustkill on the stencil. It's just terror.
They're not making anybody use it though, right? So tag at your own risk.
Yeah.
All right, I'll close that one out here. Obviously all-time terror record, all-time record. Like for the genre, I think that one is looked back at and it still holds up. Like it feels, when I listen to it, it feels modern, but it also feels like me being, I don't know, junior in college and getting into that record or whatever it was, sophomore in college, and it brings me back because that's the thing is you could see them. They toured so much. I had split time between Maine and Massachusetts. I saw them in that era, mid 2000s, so many times.
Oh yeah, and they've never stopped. They're not like, they're like the new Sick of It All, right? Like that one band who just never stopped, right? Like all other New York hardcore bands stopped, but Sick of It All just never did. They just continued to tour, continued to go to Europe, continued to sign to new labels, put out new records. And Terror is that band now,
Yeah, and the live show still rules. So
yeah,
go check them out if you haven't seen them. I don't know if you've gotten to this point in this episode, you've probably seen Terror, but
a million times.
Yeah,
cool. All right, want to move on to the last one here. Last but not least, Bleeding Through. This is Love. This is Murderous. September 2003. How did they get on your radar? Because they've been around a little bit before.
They were around a bit before. So this goes back. That came out in 2003. I first met Brandon in 1997 when I was on tour with Harvest and Endeavor, and the tour hit Southern California. We played the Showcase Theater in Corona with 18 Visions, and 18 Visions had like just started. I think it was like Dave Peters on guitar, Brandon on guitar. And so that's when I first met Brandon. I first saw 18 Visions. And then fast forward a few years later, I signed 18 Visions in 1999. I put out the 7-inch. I put out Until the Ink Runs Out in 2000. And then in 2001, we had Bleeding Through play Hellfest at the roller rink in Syracuse. And I remember being like really impressed, like, holy shit, this is cool.
Yeah.
But also being like a little hesitant because I'm like, oh man, like we're trying to like make 18 Visions pop off, right? And now Brandon's doing this, and but also we were trying to make Throwdown a thing too, right? And like then Keith was in 18 Visions, and so it was this whole like thing with Orange County. All these bands trying to like do their own thing, but they're all in the same band. It's like they can't all be full-time bands at the same time, much like we talked about, right? Like every band just assumed they had to be a full-time band. And I think, again, with Bleeding Through, I remember it really like connected with me. I'm standing there watching them at Furnace Fest. I think that might have been 2002. And I was like, holy shit, like Brandon needs to be a frontman. Like, he needs to not be in 18 Visions anymore, right? Like 2002, we put out Vanity, right? Which he was still on that record. And then like sometime after that, he quit to focus on Bleeding Through. And that's when I was like, all right, like this makes sense now. Like we're starting to separate these bands. I just like thought Brandon was just such a great front man. I'm like, let's let's do this. Like, you need to be on Trustkill. Let's put out a great record, and you guys should like hit the ground running and like tour for real. Because up to that point, they hadn't done that. It's crazy to think like the very first Bleeding Through tour was with AFI.
That is crazy.
Yeah, like the album came out, they had never really been on any tour. Like they just played some shows, and then we dropped the record to go out with AFI. Whew, man, shit started popping. That one started selling like really fast.
So were you a fan of them in the Portrait of the Goddess era?
I was. It was more metal than I was used to, right? Like,
yeah, yep.
I was a hardcore kid, right? Like, I wasn't a metal guy. I didn't come from metal. I've still probably never been to a real metal show. I was a hardcore kid. So, like, I appreciated the heavy aspects of hardcore. But, like, when I heard Portrait of the Goddess, I was like, whoa, this is, like, metal as fuck. Like, but then, like, seeing them play, it's like, all right, these are hardcore kids playing metal, and it's coming across as a hardcore band. It just happens to be more metal. And then, like, I started, like, really getting into it, and I'm like, I started to really appreciate, like, the Portrait of the Goddess songs. Like, I went back, and I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm like, you know, then I started to, like, really get into it. And then when I heard This Is Love, This Is Murderous, I was like, oh, wow, like, this is, like, the perfect mix of hardcore with that little blackened metal. Like, you know, you could tell Brandon listened to Dimmu Borgir, and, you know,
100%.
because, you know, you felt it. So yeah, it took a minute to get used to, but I became a huge fan, of course.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever heard Bleeding Through was from one of the early Hellfest DVDs, and Brandon's doing the barrel rolls, and it's just, the live show is not something maybe you would expect from a band that sounds like that. And that's why I think it connected with the heavier crowd, and it connected with people, you know, more cut from your cloth, you know?
What I knew about metal, right? Like, in my mind, like, I'm envisioning, like, you know, Nuclear Assault or Slayer, or, you know, one of these bands where it's like the singer's playing guitar and he's like just standing there.
Yeah,
you know,
this is not that.
And it's not that, you know, like, yeah, exactly. Like, dudes are going off. There's breakdowns. There's, you know, there's cool shit. So
yeah, this record, to me, it's Brandon's so pissed off in this record, and there's like a slight vocal effect that just, it's so raw. And you did the Truth album, right, after this?
Yep.
Yeah, and you get it with that too. Like, they were so unique, and they got huge. Like, I remember seeing them on the Stress tour, the Derek Hess clothing tour, in like 05, 06, and they headlined the Palladium, which is like almost 2,000 cap, and it was largely off the heels of this album.
Yeah.
What do you think of the artwork when it got submitted?
I loved it. I was wondering where they got the heart from, and then they told me. I'm like, oh, okay.
I still wonder.
Do people know that it's a pig's heart? I assume people know that. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully they do now.
Okay.
I assumed it wasn't a human.
Yeah, they just like went to like a butcher and got a pig's heart, and then on the inside, you know, there's the photos of like the guy and girl, right? Like the gun and the knife and the blood and all that. So that's my buddy Ryan is the guy. The girl was like a model. I don't remember her name, but the guy, Ryan, who was Bleeding Through, was like roadie and like merch guy and, you know, tour guy for years. So it's cool to like, you know, like we just reissued that record in the last year, and just to go back and be able to, you know, play all that artwork again was really cool.
In talking with Anthony when we get ready to talk to you, we came to the conclusion that obviously this is a massive sounding record. Was it really expensive to make it sound that big at the time?
Nah. And in 2003, when I signed the band, I gave them more money at that time than I had given any other band for one record, right? Like, I was like a year into my Sony deal, and shit was, you know, popping off. And I was like, I just kept making good decision after good decision, and each record was selling more than the last one, and like, you know, so I was very confident. I'm like, all right. So I gave them a lot of money to make a record, but they didn't spend all that money on making a record, right? They took, you know, 3/4 of that and used it to like buy a van and buy equipment and buy lights and buy, you know, or spend it on a practice space, so that whatever, you know, band expenses are. But to actually make that record did not cost a lot.
Because it sounds big. Like, it sounds like it could have, you know?
It sounds huge. Yeah. And then
huge sounding record.
Yeah. And then the truth cost more, but again, like not a crazy amount of money. I've had some bands spend a lot of fucking money on production. Like thinking back, and I'm just like, holy crap, you know, considering like now, again, the barrier to entry is so low, right? Like you could make a record for practically nothing. So
how was it for you, like in this moment? Because this is when, like, as we know, you know, modern metalcore, like this is the wave, right? This is when Unearth, Lamb of God, God forbid, Bleeding Through is on Ozfest, right? And that was a leap, right? It was new metal's dying down, and this is the new wave. How was it in the peak of that?
I mean, it was crazy. Like, I think Ozfest was definitely a catalyst, right? Like the Ozfest that had started in the late 90s was very new metal, right? Like the very first Ozfest, right? I think it was like a one-off in Texas, and it had like Earth Crisis were on it.
Yeah, they're on the tape. They're on the VHS tape that I have. Yeah.
Am I right? It was like a one-off in Texas, right?
Yeah, them and VOD, I think, were
but like
where they branched out a little.
The rest of the lineup was like totally new metal, right?
All
like,
new metal.
Yeah.
All new metal.
Power Man 5000, like the newest of new, right? So like fast forward to 2003, 4, Ozfest is the biggest thing in the world, right? Like it's the biggest marketing avenue there is for heavy music, right? It was selling out cities. They were the only festival to get people to show up at 10 a.m., right? No one was doing that at that point. But, you know, 10 o'clock a.m. on a Wednesday, the parking lot is filled with 20,000 people. Like, who else can do that? The Osbournes themselves were the biggest thing in the world at that point. They were the biggest. They started like the whole family reality thing, right? Like they were the biggest of big. So everything they touched was like fucking gold. So at that moment in time, Ozfest was massive. If you got on there, you were more than likely going to sell a ton of records and have a career. I mean, if you squandered that, then that's on you. But like a lot of bands that played Ozfest at that time are, you know, they still have a career. So yeah. I mean, it cost a lot to put Bleeding Through on that tour, but I think it was the right move.
Well, yeah, they're still around. They didn't squander it. You're right.
In fact, the Bleeding Through path was exactly what we had hoped, which was I paid to put them on Ozfest the first time, but then the next year they headlined the second stage and got paid a ton of money to do it.
Awesome.
Crazy.
So that's like, you know, that was as much as we could have ever hoped for. Like, let's spend all the money in 2003, 2004. Hopefully, shit's popping, and you guys play again, but you're going to get paid to play, and you'll get a good slot. That's exactly what happened.
Still love this record. I listened to it like 3 or 4 times leading up to this conversation, and I'm like, that breakdown in Love Lost is it's a top 10 maybe.
Yeah,
it's all time, and the video is kind of funny.
He's so pissed. He's so pissed on that record. His voice is awesome. I call that, you know, it's another like emotional hardcore album to me, right? Like what he's singing about is very emotional, but it's a hardcore record. It's, you know, it's metal. I think it has it all.
Yeah, and he really dabbles with the cleans and spots, and you hear more of that on The Truth. But massive record. Yeah, when we were thinking of which records that we wanted to chat with you about, this was right there. We got to do this one. Nice. Terror's one of the underdogs, certainly. Poison the Well. I was thinking maybe one of the 18 Visions records. You could go on. And in fact, there were a couple that I was like, oh shit, I forgot Josh did that record. It's crazy.
I mean, we could
like
do
this is Hell one, the Sundowning record. I forgot that was on Trustkill.
Yeah, just pick 3 more. We'll do Most Precious Blood, Walls of Jericho, It Dies Today.
Yeah.
Whoever.
Yeah. We'll hold you to that. We'll ask you back.
Yeah, I'll come back. No problem.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Oh, and the Wolves Among Sheep DVD, I think it could be one of my favorite music DVDs. Like you just get the story of them. So, you know, anyone who came into them from the Ozfest world, it's like, well, no, there's a little more to it than that.
Yeah, they went deep. It was very like, you know, it was almost like they had like confessionals on that one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Revenge I Seek. We call awesome last track magic. Revenge I Seek, it could be my favorite Bleeding Through song.
Yeah. How many have you counted? How many fucks are in that song?
Probably 50. I don't know. I haven't. Do you know?
I counted at one point. It's a ridiculous number of fucks. But
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, let's real quick pivot to Hellfest, because if you're listening to this the week that it comes out, that is later this week. So you've got Hellfest back July 4th through the 6th, Rutherford, New Jersey, Williams Center. What have you got in store for that? I know you've got bands playing. It's exciting.
It's exciting. Yeah. Again, this is all shit I couldn't have imagined that I would be able to pull off just a couple of years ago. Hellfest went away in 2005 when it collapsed, and I didn't think about Hellfest again for years. And the French promoter took the name in like 2014 and they ran with it. So at some point when I was digging into Trustkill world, bringing the label back, digging into the catalog, doing all this stuff, I just, again, it's like looking back, like I now realize like how intertwined the Trustkill legacy is with Hellfest, and like the brands are almost like inextricably connected.
Agree. Yep.
And so I'm like, man, I should bring this back somehow. Like, how the fuck am I going to do this? So that took a long time. And this whole like Hellfira idea came up last year, talking to Senti from Balmora and Afira Records. And yeah, man, we put this thing together. We really got started like in January, putting the lineup together, confirming bands. And then we put the July 4th pre-show together, which is the Friday with Bayway, the record release, which again, like I was saying, it feels very much like Hellfest 2004, where I had Terror dropping one with the Underdogs on the Friday. Like, it just feels very similar. It's very exciting. We got a lot of really cool vendors coming out with a lot of really cool shit they're working on, like exclusive stuff. There's going to be a lot of cool Trustkill and Hellfira exclusive stuff. We got some surprises, and we got a great media team. So we're going to be running, like, if you can't make it, that sucks. But we'll be running like near live, like hype clips throughout the weekend for various bands.
Nice.
Which is really cool. And yeah, we're psyched. And I'm already working on all the next things, the next events for 2026 and beyond. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's cool that it's back. It's cool that, again, if you're listening to this the week of release, then it's a couple of days. If you can't get there, it sounds like there's a chance for you to, stay informed on what's going on social. So take a peek.
Yeah, everyone's definitely going to have some FOMO if you're not there, but you'll see all the clips and you'll wish you were there, and then you'll buy an early bird pass for next year.
Yeah, there you go. Boom.
Well, yeah. Josh, we'll wrap you up and get you out of here. But I'll say, from a fan of Trustkill for 20 plus years, I'm excited. Like, I don't know what's to come, and like this conversation has been, it actually has made me more excited, because it sounds like there's more to come, and
that's awesome. There's so much.
I don't know. It's best of both worlds with the back catalog, kind of fresh energy, and we're here for it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll hit you up for
round two. We'll do round two. Absolutely.
You should do like a poll or something, like let your audience pick the next three.
I like that. Yeah, that works.
Right. So, like, is it Bullet for My Valentine? Is it Walls of Jericho? It Dies Today, Most Precious Blood, This Is Hell, Hope Fall? I mean, like,
there's plenty. Yeah, we could go. We could have fun with that.
We could do two more. First Blood. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm looking at your background, and there's some heaters in there, so we'd have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing all this shit with Smart Punk, right? Like, we just reissued Bedlight for Blue Eyes. Or not reissued, we put Bedlight for Blue Eyes on vinyl. We just did Roses Are Red on vinyl. We're doing Fight Paris on vinyl. Man, yeah, a lot of cool shit. The Truth will come out next year, 20-year anniversary of The Truth. They're going to tour the fuck out of that. We got It Dies Today, Sirens coming out finally on vinyl. Walls of Jericho. There's it's endless.
Man,
Love it. So yes, round 2 booked, maybe even round 3 actually. Now that we named off all these records, man.
Hit me up by email if you need a photo, logo, whatever you need.
Awesome.
cool. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you for listening to Patio Slave. We are at Patio Slave on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the places that you can find us on social media. Facebook, Patio Slave Podcast. YouTube, Patio Slave Podcast there. Email us at patioslavepodcast@gmail.com. And hey, if you want to become a supporter, click on the link at the bottom of the episode and give us $1, give us $5. It keeps the lights on, keeps us going. We really appreciate that stuff. Thank you.